My sister showed up with a forged court order and an empty car seat, saying she was there to take her baby home, then hummed our childhood lullaby through the door. When I asked her why she was doing this to me, she blinked slowly and whispered, "Because I've already told everyone he's mine." I didn't say a word. That was almost a year ago. This morning, she was sitting outside our old house in her car, rocking a baby doll and staring at nothing. "Did anyone ever try to take your baby?" When I told my mother I was pregnant, she smiled and said, "Perfect timing. Your sister's infertility treatments just failed again, and I already promised her you'd have a baby for her." I'd been raised watching my mother give away everything I owned to my older sister. When I got toys for Christmas, Mom would let me play with them for a week before giving them to Jane because she needed them more. I thought it was just favoritism until I realized Mom genuinely believed I existed to provide for Jane. She'd tell people I was Jane's little helper and that God gave her 2 daughters so one could support the other. When Jane got married and couldn't conceive, Mom started dropping hints about other options. She'd stare at my stomach during family dinners and tell Jane not to worry, that solutions appeared when you had faith. I was too naive to understand what she meant. I thought she was talking about adoption or egg donation, not that she'd already decided my future children belonged to my sister. My husband David and I had been trying for a year when I finally got pregnant. I wanted to wait to tell my family, but David insisted we share the joy. When I told Mom at Sunday dinner, she clasped her hands and turned to Jane. "See? I told you God would provide." Jane started crying with relief while Mom explained that I'd be giving the baby to my sister after birth. She'd already told Jane I'd agreed to this plan months ago. I stood up so fast I knocked over my chair. I told them they were insane if they thought I'd give away my baby. Mom's face went cold. She reminded me of all the sacrifices Jane had made, how she'd given up her career dreams to try for a baby, how her marriage was failing from the stress. "You can have more babies," Mom said. "This is Jane's only chance." David grabbed my hand and we left while Jane sobbed that I was stealing her baby. For the next few weeks, Mom called constantly. She'd leave voicemails about how Jane was wrecked, how I was unaliving my sister by keeping the baby. She sent photos of the nursery Jane had already decorated, the clothes she'd bought, the name she'd chosen. When I blocked her number, she started showing up at my work. Security had to escort her out when she tried to follow me into the bathroom to talk sense into me. We decided we needed to get as far away from the as possible before the baby was born. David got a transfer to another state and we left without telling anyone. I gave birth to our son in peaceful anonymity. For 6 months, we were a normal family. Then David's mother accidentally mentioned the baby to someone from our hometown. Within days, Mom found us. She brought Jane, who'd lost weight and looked haunted. 6 months, Jane whispered. "I've been waiting 6 months for my son." She'd been living as if a baby was hers, telling everyone about her child who'd been temporarily placed with me. In her world, she was already his mother. Mom explained calmly that Jane's husband would leave if she didn't come home with a baby. Her marriage, her sanity, her life depended on getting her child. I tried to slam the door, but Jane put her foot in the way. "Please," she begged. "I'll let you visit. You can be his aunt. I'll even let you babysit sometimes." She genuinely thought she was being generous. When I still refused, Mom's expression hardened. She said if I didn't hand over the baby voluntarily, they'd take him anyway. Jane had already filed paperwork claiming I'd agreed to be her surrogate. They had forged contracts, fake emails, an entire paper trail showing I'd promised her this baby. David called the police, but Mom and Jane left before they arrived. The officers said without immediate threat, it was a civil matter. We hired a lawyer who said the forged documents were obviously fake, but would still need to be disputed in court. While we waited for a hearing, Mom escalated. She called CPS claiming we were substance dealers. She contacted David's employer saying he'd stolen money. She filed for emergency custody as the concerned grandmother of a child in danger. Each false report required investigation, draining our savings on legal fees. Meanwhile, Jane started showing up everywhere. The grocery store, the pediatrician, the park. She'd follow at a distance, taking photos, studying our routines. She'd mouth my baby whenever our eyes met. I couldn't sleep, constantly checking locks, afraid to leave the house. David started missing work to guard us, which his boss didn't understand. Then came the letter from Jane's lawyer. She was suing for custody based on maternal alienation. The forged surrogacy agreement was attached, along with statements from family friends swearing I'd promised the baby to Jane. Mom had convinced half our hometown that I was a surrogate who'd stolen Jane's child. The lawyer said we could fight it, but it would take years and cost everything. Or we could settle out of court with a visitation agreement that started with weekends and expanded over time. We were sitting in our living room, exhausted and broke, when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Jane holding a car seat. Behind her stood Mom and 2 men I didn't recognize. "We're here for the baby's overnight visit," Jane called through the door. "The court order is signed." My hands shook as I checked my phone. Our lawyer had sent an emergency text. The judge had granted temporary visitation pending the full hearing, starting immediately. David was calling the police while I held our son, but I knew they'd have to enforce the court order. Jane knocked again, harder this time. "Open up," she said sweetly. "Mommy's here to take you home." Behind her, Mom smiled. They'd won this round, and we all knew once Jane had him for even one night, she'd never bring him back. I gripped my son tighter as David's voice rose on the phone with 911. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to stay standing. Through the door, I could hear Jane humming a lullaby, the same one Mom used to sing to us as children. The sound made my skin crawl. David hung up and moved to my side. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. He reached for our son, and I let him take him, my arms trembling from holding him so tightly. David's eyes met mine, and I saw the same fear reflected there, but also determination. The police arrived within minutes, though it felt like hours. 2 officers approached our door while Jane stepped back, clutching the empty car seat like a prize. Mom stood behind her, one hand on Jane's shoulder, her expression serene as if this was all perfectly normal. I opened the door before they could knock again. The first officer, a woman with kind eyes, looked between us and the group on our lawn. She asked to see the court order. Jane practically thrust it at her, her hands shaking with excitement. The officer read it carefully while her partner kept watch. I saw her frown deepen with each line. She handed it to her partner, then turned to us. She explained that the order appeared legitimate, but she had concerns about the circumstances. She asked if we had legal representation. David gave her our lawyer's number. While she stepped aside to make the call, Jane inched closer to our door. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the way she kept looking past me, searching for her baby. Mom whispered something in her ear, and Jane nodded rapidly. The officer returned after what felt like an eternity. She informed us that our lawyer was on his way and had advised us not to comply with the order until he arrived. The judge who'd signed it was known for rubber stamping emergency motions without proper review. Our lawyer suspected the order might not hold up under scrutiny. Jane's face crumpled. She started wailing about her baby, how she'd waited so long, how we were torturing her. Mom's mask finally slipped. Her voice turned sharp as she demanded the officers enforce the order immediately. She threatened to file complaints, to have their badges, to sue the entire department. The second officer stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. He explained that given the unusual circumstances and the allegations of forged documents, they would wait for legal counsel to arrive before taking any action. He suggested Jane and her party wait in their vehicle. Mom's face turned red. She grabbed Jane's arm and pulled her toward a black SUV parked at our curb. The two men I didn't recognize followed. One of them kept staring at our house, as if memorizing every detail. I shuddered and stepped back inside. Our lawyer arrived 20 minutes later, looking harried but determined. He examined the court order and immediately spotted several irregularities. The judge's signature was stamped, not handwritten. The case number didn't match any in the system. Most damning, the order referenced a hearing that had supposedly taken place that morning, when court records showed the judge had been in a completely different county. He called the courthouse directly. After a tense conversation, he hung up with a grim smile. The order was fraudulent. Someone had used official-looking paperwork and a stolen stamp to create it. The real judge was furious and would be filing charges. The police officers took statements from everyone. Jane seemed genuinely confused, insisting her lawyer had given her the papers. Mom maintained her story that I'd agreed to be a surrogate, even when confronted with the evidence of forgery. The two men with them turned out to be process servers Jane had hired to witness the transfer. As the officers prepared to leave, they warned Jane and Mom about trespassing. Any further attempts to take our son would result in immediate arrest. Jane sobbed hysterically as Mom led her away, but not before Mom turned back to look at me. Her expression was calm, calculating. This wasn't over. Our lawyer stayed after everyone left. He laid out our options, none of them good. I wonder what's really driving the mother to go this far. Forging court papers isn't just favoritism anymore. That's criminal behavior that could land her in jail. There's something deeper here about why she needs Jane to have this baby so badly. The forged court order would help our case, but Jane's custody suit was still moving forward. The fake surrogacy documents, while clearly fraudulent, had been filed with multiple agencies. Untangling the mess would take months, maybe years. He advised us to document everything. Every encounter, every phone call, every sighting. We needed to build an airtight case showing the pattern of harassment and deception. He also recommended we consider a restraining order, though he warned it might escalate things further. That night, David and I took shifts sleeping. One of us was always awake, watching the windows, checking the locks. Our son slept peacefully in his crib, unaware of the chaos surrounding him. I sat beside him during my watch, memorizing his face, terrified this might be one of our last nights together. The next morning brought a new horror. David's boss called to say he was being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into the theft allegations. Even though the claims were obviously false, the company had to follow protocol. We'd gone from 2 incomes to none overnight. I started calling daycares to warn them about Jane and Mom. Most were sympathetic, but said they couldn't refuse a family member without a court order. One director quietly suggested I might want to find a facility that didn't know our family history. The implication was clear. Nowhere would be safe. Our savings were draining fast. Between lawyer fees, the lost income, and the security measures we'd installed, we were burning through money at an alarming rate. I started selling things online, anything we could spare. David applied for jobs, but the pending investigation made employers hesitant. 3 days after the fake court order incident, I saw Jane at the grocery store. She was in the baby aisle, running her fingers over tiny onesies. When she spotted me, she didn't approach, just stood there staring. I abandoned my cart and left immediately. That afternoon, our lawyer called with disturbing news. Jane had filed additional paperwork claiming I was mentally unstable and had threatened to harm the baby rather than give him up. She'd submitted statements from 3 witnesses who'd supposedly heard me make these threats. All 3 were Mom's church friends who'd do anything she asked. The allegations meant another CPS investigation. Even though we'd been cleared before, each new report created more paperwork, more scrutiny. The social worker who came seemed sympathetic, but warned that repeated reports, even false ones, created a pattern that courts noticed. David's investigation cleared him within a week, but the damage was done. His boss said that while they believed he was innocent, the disruption to the workplace had been significant. They offered him a severance package if he resigned quietly. With no other choice, he took it. We were running out of options and money. Our lawyer suggested we might need to consider more drastic measures. Maybe moving again, further away, maybe changing our names, maybe cutting all ties with both our families permanently. The thought of living and hiding from my own mother and sister made me sick, but what choice did we have? Then came the envelope slipped under our door. No postmark, hand-delivered. Inside were photos of our son at the park, at the doctor's office, through our living room window. Each one was labeled in Jane's handwriting. My baby's first swing, my baby's checkup, my baby's bedtime. The last photo showed him sleeping in his crib, taken from outside his window. David installed cameras that night. We moved our son's crib into our room. I stopped taking him anywhere unnecessary. We were prisoners in our own home, afraid to leave, afraid to stay. Every car that passed made my heart race. Every knock at the door sent us into panic mode. Our lawyer filed for the restraining order the next morning. He fast-tracked it based on the photos, which even he found disturbing. The hearing was set for the following week. He warned us to be prepared for Mom and Jane to escalate once they were served. He was right. The day after they received the papers, our mailbox was smashed. Our car tires were slashed. Someone spray-painted "baby thief" across our garage door. The cameras caught nothing but shadows. The police took reports but said without clear evidence, there was little they could do. I found myself checking on our son constantly, needing to see him, touch him, confirm he was still there. David started sleeping on the floor by his crib. We both knew we were falling apart, but we couldn't stop. The fear was consuming us. A week before the restraining order hearing, Mom did something we hadn't expected. She called David's parents. She told them her version of events, how I'd promised Jane a baby, how we were destroying Jane's life by keeping what was rightfully hers. She painted herself as the concerned grandmother trying to keep the family together. David's parents, who'd been supportive until then, started asking questions. Why hadn't we told them about the surrogacy agreement? Why were we being so cruel to Jane? Couldn't we at least let her visit? Mom had planted seeds of doubt, and they were growing. We spent hours on the phone explaining, sending them copies of the forged documents, sharing our lawyer's assessments. They believed us eventually, but the damage damage was done. The stress had spread to David's family now too. Mom was systematically isolating us from everyone who might help. The restraining order hearing arrived. We sat in the courthouse hallway, our son in his carrier between us. I could see Jane and Mom at the other end with their lawyer. Jane kept craning her neck to see the baby. Mom sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap like she was at church. Our lawyer had prepared us for what would happen. We'd present evidence of harassment and stalking. They'd argue it was all a misunderstanding, that Jane was just a heartbroken woman trying to claim what was promised to her. The judge would decide if the threat was credible enough to warrant protection. What we hadn't prepared for was Jane's complete breakdown on the stand. When asked about the photos, she didn't deny taking them. Instead, she sobbed about how she just wanted to document her baby's milestones, since we were keeping her away. She talked about the nursery waiting at home, the clothes getting too small, the bottles she sterilized every week just in case. She pulled out a baby book she'd been keeping. Every page was filled with notes about her son, his weight and length from the pediatrician visits she'd stalked, descriptions of his expressions from the photos she'd taken, plans for his first birthday, his first day of school, his graduation. In her mind, his entire future was mapped out, and she was his mother in every scenario. Even Mom looked uncomfortable as Jane spiraled further into her delusion. The judge had to call a recess when Jane started hyperventilating about missing her baby's first smile, even though I'd seen him smile dozens of times. During the break, Mom approached us in the hallway. David stepped between us, but she just looked tired. For the first time, I saw her mask completely gone. She admitted Jane wasn't well. The infertility had broken something in her. But instead of getting Jane help, Mom had fed the delusion, thinking if she could just get her the baby, everything would be fine. She actually asked, one mother to another, if we could find some compromise, maybe supervised visits, maybe just photos, anything to keep Jane from completely shattering. I felt a moment of pity until she added that if Jane had a breakdown, she'd make sure everyone knew it was our fault for being so selfish. The hearing resumed. The judge, a woman with grown children of her own, listened carefully to both sides. She reviewed the evidence, the forged documents, the photos, the harassment. Then she made her decision. The restraining order was granted. Jane and Mom were to stay 500 feet away from us, our home, and our son. No contact through third parties. No photos, no surveillance, no attempts to circumvent the order. Violation would result in immediate arrest. Jane wailed so loudly they had to remove her from the courtroom. Mom followed, but not before locking eyes with me one last time. The look promised this wasn't over. They'd find another way. We left through a side exit, our lawyer warning us to be extra vigilant in the coming days. People who'd lost in court often lashed out. He advised us to stay with friends or in a hotel for a few nights, just to be safe. But we had nowhere to go. Our families were either turned against us or too far away. We couldn't afford a hotel with our dwindling savings. So we went home, to our house that no longer felt safe, and waited for whatever would come next. That night, as I lay awake listening to every sound, I thought about how different life was supposed to be. We should have been enjoying our son's first months, not living in fear. We should have been planning his future, not wondering if we'd still have custody next week. David reached over and took my hand. Neither of us spoke. We both knew the restraining order was just paper. It wouldn't stop Mom from plotting or Jane from spiraling further into delusion. We'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. Our son stirred in his crib, making soft baby noises. I got up to check on him, as I did dozens of times each night now. He was fine, sleeping peacefully, unaware that two women were fighting to claim him as their own. I touched his soft cheek and made a promise. No matter what it took, no matter what we had to sacrifice, we would protect him. Mom and Jane had turned our life into a nightmare, but they wouldn't win. We were his parents, and we would fight for him until our last breath. The house creaked in the wind, and I tensed before recognizing the familiar sound. Every noise was a threat now. Every shadow, a potential danger. Jane's baby book for someone else's child hits a whole new level of scary, documenting stolen moments like she's creating the world's creepiest scrapbook while the judge watches this mess unfold in real time. This was no way to live, but it was our reality, at least for now. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more legal battles, more harassment, more attempts to steal our son. But tonight, he was safe in his crib, and we were together. For now, that had to be enough. I returned to bed, knowing sleep wouldn't come. David pulled me close, and we lay there in the dark, two parents united against a threat we'd never imagined would come from our own family. The battle for our son's future had only just begun. The restraining order should have given us peace, but Mom found ways around it. She couldn't come within 500 feet, but that didn't stop her from orchestrating her campaign through others. The first sign came through our mailbox. Legal notices from 3 different law firms, all representing concerned parties filing reports about our fitness as parents. Each firm had been hired by different church members, all coincidentally from Mom's congregation. The coordination was obvious but unprovable. David spent his days responding to these allegations while I stayed home with our son. We'd converted our dining room into a makeshift office, boxes of documentation covering every surface, bank statements proving we weren't substance dealers, employment records showing David's clean history, medical records confirming our son's perfect health. Each response cost money we didn't have. Our lawyer warned us this was a war of attrition. Mom couldn't take our son directly, so she'd drain us financially until we couldn't fight anymore. He reduced his fees as much as possible, but court filings and responses still added up. I sold my grandmother's jewelry, the one thing Mom hadn't given away to Jane when we were kids. 2 weeks after the restraining order, I noticed a pattern. Every time I left the house, someone would be there. Not Jane or Mom, but strangers who seemed too interested in my son. A woman at the pharmacy who kept trying to touch his hand. A man at the gas station who asked too many questions about his age and routine. They never did anything illegal, just enough to make me paranoid. David installed more cameras and started documenting everything. License plates of cars that lingered too long outside our house. Screenshots of new social media accounts that tried to friend us with no mutual connections. Photos of people who showed up repeatedly in different locations. Our paranoia notebook grew thicker each day. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. David's cousin Sarah, who still lived in our hometown, called with disturbing news. Mom had started a support group at church for grandparents denied access to grandchildren. She'd been recruiting members, sharing her tragic story of a daughter who'd stolen her grandchild. The group met weekly to pray and plan interventions. Sarah had attended a meeting undercover, pretending her own son had cut her off. She recorded Mom explaining how documentation was key, how multiple reports from different sources carried more weight than a single complaint, how patience and persistence would eventually wear down even the most stubborn parents. Mom was teaching a masterclass in legal illegal harassment. We gave the recording to our lawyer, but he shook his head. Nothing Mom said was technically illegal. She never explicitly told people to lie, just to share their concerns with authorities. She was careful with her words, a lifetime of manipulation making her an expert at walking the legal line. Our son turned 1 during this siege. We couldn't have a party, couldn't invite anyone who might accidentally share photos or information. David baked a small cake while I decorated our living room with balloons. We sang happy birthday in whispers, afraid of who might be listening outside. I cried when he smashed his tiny fist into the frosting, thinking of all the normal moments we were missing. That night, our security system alerted us to movement in the backyard. David grabbed the baseball bat we now kept by the bed while I rushed to our son's room. Through the camera feed, we saw a figure by the fence, but they disappeared before we could get a clear image. The police found footprints and a dropped phone, but it was a burner with no useful information. The next morning, we discovered what the intruder had been doing. They'd installed a small camera aimed at our son's window. The device was sophisticated, motion activated, and broadcasting to somewhere we couldn't trace. Our lawyer said finding it actually helped our case, but I couldn't stop shaking. Someone had been watching my baby sleep. We moved his crib again, this time to our walk-in closet. No windows, one entrance, easier to defend. David installed a lock on the inside. We were turning our home into a fortress, each room evaluated for its defensive potential. This wasn't how anyone should live. The financial pressure intensified. David's severance was gone. My online sales barely covered groceries. We'd maxed out credit cards paying legal fees. Our lawyer connected us with a legal aid organization, but they were overwhelmed with cases. We got some help, but mostly we were on our own. Then Jane escalated in a way we hadn't expected. She published a blog called My Journey to Motherhood. In it, she documented her fertility struggles, her sister's promise to help, and her ongoing fight to bring her son home. She posted ultrasound photos I recognized as mine, newborn pictures she'd stolen from my social media before I'd locked everything down. In her narrative, she'd been in the delivery room, cut the umbilical cord, chosen his name. The blog went viral in certain circles. Infertility support groups shared it. Grandparent rights activists championed her cause. Soon, we were getting messages from strangers calling me a monster. Our address wasn't published, but it wasn't hard to find. Packages started arriving, some containing baby items for Jane to give her son, others containing less pleasant things. David's job search became impossible. Every employer Googled him and found Jane's blog, the legal battles, the drama. One hiring manager actually asked if he was the father trying to steal a baby from an infertile woman. We realized Mom had poisoned the well so thoroughly that we'd never have a normal life in this state. We started researching other states, places where we could start fresh. But moving required money we didn't have, and our lawyer warned that leaving during an active custody battle would look like we were fleeing, which could hurt our case. We were trapped. The church support group Mom ran grew bolder. Members started showing up at places just outside the restraining orders range. They'd stand on the sidewalk during our son's doctor appointments, holding signs about grandparent rights. They'd form prayer circles in the parking lot of the grocery store. Always peaceful, always legal, always just close enough to let us know we were being watched. One member, an elderly woman named Dorothy, approached me at the gas station. She stayed the required distance away but spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. She talked about forgiveness, about family reconciliation, about the harm I was causing by keeping a grandmother from her grandchild. Other customers started staring, some nodding along with Dorothy's words. I left without filling my tank, hands shaking so badly I could barely buckle my son into his car seat. That night, I found Dorothy's social media. She had 6 grandchildren of her own, all with normal relationships. But in Mom's support group, she'd found a cause, a way to feel righteous. Mom had weaponized an army of bored retirees. Our lawyer filed harassment charges, but they went nowhere. No individual had done anything illegal. The coordination was clear, but unprovable. Each person claimed they were acting on their own conscience, moved by Jane's story and Mom's pain. The system wasn't designed to handle distributed harassment. David started having panic attacks. He'd wake up gasping, convinced someone was in the house. I wasn't much better, jumping at every sound, seeing threats everywhere. We took turns having breakdowns, one always staying strong for our son, but we were cracking. The custody hearing kept getting delayed. Jane's lawyer filed motion after motion, each requiring response, each costing money. They questioned our mental health, our finances, our living situation. They submitted hundreds of pages of documentation, forcing us to respond to each claim. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. During one particularly bad week, our car was vandalized 3 times. Nothing major, just enough damage to be expensive. Slashed tires, broken windshield, sugar in the gas tank, always when the car was parked somewhere without cameras. The police suggested we were being targeted but had no proof of who was responsible. I started keeping our son in a carrier strapped to my body at all times when we were out. David walked behind us, watching for threats. We must have looked insane, but we didn't care. Every trip outside was a military operation. Plan the route, check for familiar faces, never stay anywhere too long, always have an escape plan. Our families began to fracture under the pressure. David's parents, already doubting because of Mom's poison, grew frustrated with our paranoia. They suggested we were overreacting, that maybe some supervised visits would calm things down. When we refused, they pulled back, tired of the drama. My few remaining friends distanced themselves too. Who could blame them? Being associated with us meant possibly ending up on Mom's radar. One friend admitted she'd started getting strange calls after being seen with me. Another found her social media flooded with messages about enabling child abuse. Mom's network was vast and vindictive. Isolation was part of the strategy, our lawyer explained. Make us so toxic that no one would help. Remove our support system. Leave us nowhere to turn except surrender. The way everyone just happens to join Mom's cause feels really convenient. Dorothy has 6 grandkids of her own but suddenly needs to harass strangers at gas stations. Makes me wonder what Mom's actually telling these church people to get them this worked up about someone else's family drama. It was working. The blog Jane maintained grew more elaborate. She posted about preparing for her son's return. Photos of the room she'd decorated, the clothes she'd bought in increasing sizes, the toys arranged perfectly. She wrote letters to him explaining why Mommy had been kept away, but promising they'd be together soon. The comment section was full of encouragement and outrage on her behalf. Someone leaked our new address to the blog's followers. Not published directly, but in code obvious enough for motivated people to figure out. The harassment increased. Pizza deliveries we didn't order. Service calls for problems we didn't have. Anonymous reports to every agency imaginable. Each interruption was minor, but the cumulative effect was exhausting. David's David suggested we go to the media ourselves, tell our side, but our lawyer advised against it. We'd look defensive, desperate, and any publicity would only amplify Jane's platform. Better to stay quiet, document everything, trust the system. But trusting the system felt impossible when the system seemed designed to enable this torture. One morning, I found Jane sitting in her car outside the restraining order boundary. She wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, staring at our house. When she saw me looking, she held up a baby doll, cradling it like a real infant. She stayed there for hours, legally far enough away, psychologically much too close. The police came but couldn't do anything. She was on a public street. She wasn't making threats. She was just a sad woman with a doll. They suggested we invest in better curtains. That night, David and I had our worst fight. He wanted to leave the state immediately, custody battle or not, take our son and run, start over somewhere Mom couldn't find us. I argued we'd lose everything we'd built legally, give them ammunition to paint us as kidnappers. We screamed at each other while our son cried, both of us too exhausted to be rational. We made up eventually, crying and apologizing, recognizing the stress was destroying us from within, but the cracks were showing. Mom's campaign was working exactly as designed. The next phase began subtly. People from the church group started getting jobs at places we frequented. The grocery store hired Dorothy as a greeter. The pharmacy got a new technician who'd been at Mom's support meetings. Our pediatrician's office added a receptionist whose social media showed connections to Jane's blog followers. None of them ever violated the restraining order or did anything overtly threatening, but knowing they were there, watching, reporting back, made every errand feel like walking through enemy territory. We started driving to stores farther away, but gas cost money we didn't have. Our lawyer was running out of options. The custody case was moving at a glacial pace. The harassment was escalating, but staying just legal enough. Our evidence files were enormous, but somehow never quite enough. He suggested mediation, maybe finding some middle ground. The look on my face stopped him mid-sentence. David's mental health deteriorated further. He stopped sleeping, convinced someone would break in the moment he closed his eyes. He'd patrol the house all night, checking locks, reviewing camera footage, making notes in our security journal. I begged him to see a doctor, but he refused. Medical records could be subpoenaed, used against us. The financial death spiral accelerated. We were behind on mortgage payments, credit cards maxed out, selling everything we could while trying to maintain some semblance of normal life for our son. He was walking now, talking in simple words, blissfully unaware his entire world was under siege. I applied for jobs, but the same poison that affected David affected me. One interviewer actually printed out pages from Jane's blog, asking if I was the sister who'd stolen a baby. I walked out without answering. There was no point. Our lawyer connected us with a domestic violence advocate. Even though there'd been no physical violence, she recognized the pattern of coercive control. She helped us apply for emergency assistance, connected us with resources, but she also warned us that cases like ours often escalated. The restraining order was just paper. If Jane or Mom decided to cross that line, paper wouldn't protect us. We installed more locks, more cameras, motion sensors, alarms on every window. Our home looked like a prison, but at least we controlled who got in. David's parents saw it during a rare visit and were horrified. This paranoia, they said, wasn't healthy for a child, as if we had a choice. The custody hearing finally got a date, 6 months away. Our lawyer said it was actually fast for family court. 6 more months of this siege. 6 more months of drain and pressure and fear. I didn't know if we'd make it. Jane's behavior grew more erratic as the hearing approached. The car sitting increased. Sometimes Mom would be with her, both of them just watching. They started bringing others from the support group, a rotating shift of watchers, careful to stay legal distance away, making sure we knew we were never alone. One woman brought a camera with a telephoto lens, taking pictures of our house. When confronted by police, she claimed to be a bird watcher. The robin on our fence was particularly interesting, she said. The officer didn't believe her but couldn't prove otherwise. We stopped going outside unless absolutely necessary. Groceries delivered. Everything possible handled online. Our world shrank to the walls of our house. Our son pointed at the windows, wanting to go to the park, to play outside. We distracted him with indoor games, hating ourselves for making his world so small. The blog posts grew darker. Jane wrote about dreams where her son called for her, about the physical pain of empty arms, about justice coming soon. Her followers encouraged her, shared their own stories of children kept from them. The comment sections became echo chambers of grievance and rage. Someone started a fundraiser for Jane's legal fees. Help a mother reunite with her stolen child. It raised thousands within days. Our lawyer said it was brilliant. Now Jane had resources while we were drowning. Mom's strategy of financial exhaustion was working perfectly. David's breakdown came suddenly. I found him in our son's closet room at 3 a.m., holding our sleeping child and sobbing. He kept apologizing, saying he'd failed as a father, failed to protect his family. I held them both, trying to be strong, but I was just as broken. We made the decision that night. We'd leave, take what we could carry, and disappear. Let them win the legal battle if it meant our son could have a normal life somewhere else. The system had failed us. The law couldn't protect us from this death by 1,000 cuts. Running felt like our only option. We started planning carefully, researching states with strong privacy laws, looking for cash jobs, learning about changing identities legally. It felt surreal, like we were criminals planning a heist. But what else could we do? Our lawyer tried one last gambit. He filed an emergency motion detailing the pattern of harassment, the financial destruction, the coordinated campaign. He argued that Jane and Mom were using the legal system as a weapon, that this wasn't about custody, but about control and punishment. The judge agreed to an emergency hearing, not the full custody case, but a review of the harassment claims. It was scheduled for next week. Our lawyer was cautiously optimistic. This judge had a reputation for seeing through manipulation. Maybe finally, someone would see what was really happening. The week before the hearing, everything intensified. The watchers increased. The phone calls and deliveries escalated. Jane's blog posts became daily, counting down to reunion day. Mom's church group held vigils outside the courthouse. The pressure was crushing, but we held on. We had to. This hearing was our last shot at a normal life. If the judge saw through Mom's manipulation, maybe we could finally have peace. If not, we had our escape plan ready. David and I spent the nights reviewing our evidence. Hundreds of pages documenting months of harassment. Photos, recordings, financial records showing the systematic destruction of our lives. It painted a clear picture, but would it be enough? Our son took his first real steps that week, toddling between David and me in our living room. We cheered quietly, afraid of who might be listening. I took a mental picture, knowing we might be in a different state by next week, starting over with nothing but each other. The morning of the hearing arrived gray and drizzling. We dressed carefully, trying to look stable and responsible despite the exhaustion etched on our faces. Our son babbled happily in his car seat, unaware this day might change everything. As we drove to the courthouse, I saw Jane's car in the distance, maintaining the legal boundary but following us. Mom's SUV joined from another street. By the time we reached the courthouse, a parade of vehicles trailed behind. They couldn't enter the parking lot, but they lined the streets, watching. David carried our son while I hauled our evidence boxes. Our lawyer met us at the entrance, his face grim but determined. He'd spent all night preparing, he said. This judge would hear the truth. Inside, Jane and Mom sat with their legal team. Jane clutched her baby doll, rocking it gently. Mom's church group filled the gallery. Our side was empty except for us. David's cousin Sarah had wanted to come but received threats. We told her to stay away. As we waited for the judge, I held my son tight, breathing in his baby smell, memorizing the weight of him in my arms. Whatever happened next, we'd face it together. We'd survived this long. We could survive whatever came next. The bailiff called us to rise. The judge entered, a stern-faced woman who'd seen too much family dysfunction. Jane's carrying a baby doll to court while the real baby's parents carry boxes of proof that she's lost it. Someone should tell her props don't help custody cases. She looked at the packed gallery, at Jane with her doll, at us with our exhaustion. Her expression revealed nothing. Our lawyer stood to begin. This was it. Our chance to show the truth. To prove that love wasn't about possession. That family wasn't about control. That a child deserved peace, not this war. The judge reviewed our evidence for what felt like hours. She examined each forged document, studied the photos Jane had taken through our windows, read through the harassment logs we'd compiled. Her face remained neutral as she flipped through pages documenting our systematic destruction. Jane's lawyer argued that his client was simply a heartbroken woman, trying to maintain connection with a child she'd been promised. He presented Jane's baby book, her decorated nursery photos, testimonials from Mom's church group about my cruelty in denying a sister her only chance at motherhood. Jane rocked her doll throughout his presentation, occasionally whispering to it. When the judge asked Jane directly about the surveillance photos, Jane's response shocked everyone. She calmly explained that she needed to document her son's milestones since we were temporarily preventing visits. She pulled out a detailed schedule she'd created, showing when he napped, ate, played. She knew his routines better than some parents who lived with their children. The delusion was complete. Mom testified next, portraying herself as a peacemaker trying to hold her family together. She spoke eloquently about the importance of family bonds, how children needed extended family, how my selfishness was destroying not just Jane, but our entire family structure. Several church members in the gallery nodded along, clearly moved by her performance. Our lawyer systematically dismantled their arguments. He showed how the forged surrogacy documents had been created, tracing the paper trail to a print shop near Mom's house. He presented evidence that Jane's lawyer had been disciplined previously for ethics violations. He demonstrated how Mom's support group was actually a coordination center for harassment. The judge asked pointed questions about the restraining order violations. How did Jane obtain photos from inside our home? Why were church members showing up at every location we visited? How did anonymous reports to CPS always coincide with important hearings? Mom deflected skillfully, but I saw the judge's eyes narrow with each evasion. During a break, I overheard two church members in the bathroom discussing their next moves. They mentioned something about a new strategy involving David's workplace connections. I texted our lawyer immediately. He advised me to record if possible, but they left before I could get my phone ready. Back in session, our lawyer presented our financial records. The judge saw how we'd gone from comfortable middle class to near bankruptcy in months. Every legal response, every security measure, every lost job opportunity connected directly to Mom's campaign. The pattern was undeniable. Jane's composure finally cracked when the judge questioned her about the break-in attempt. She insisted she had a right to see her son, that we were the ones committing a crime by keeping him from her. She stood up, clutching her doll, and demanded the judge return her baby immediately. Her lawyer tried to calm her, but she was beyond reason. Mom tried damage control, explaining that Jane was just emotional, that she'd been under tremendous stress, but the mask had slipped. The judge saw what we'd been dealing with for months, a woman so deep in delusion she genuinely believed our son was hers. The judge called another recess to review everything. We waited in a small conference room, our son playing with toys on the floor, blissfully unaware his future was being decided. David paced while I sat frozen, afraid to hope. Our lawyer returned with news. The judge wanted to interview our son's pediatrician and the CPS workers who'd investigated us. She was taking this seriously, not just rubber stamping like the previous judges. Court was adjourned until the following day. That night, we barely slept. Mom's network went into overdrive. Our doorbell rang constantly until we disconnected it. Cars drove by slowly, honking their horns. Someone set off fireworks in our backyard at 3 a.m. The police came twice but couldn't catch anyone in the act. The next morning, we arrived to find the courthouse steps packed with Mom's supporters. They held signs about grandparent rights and family values. Some had photos of Jane with her doll, portraying her as a grieving mother. We had to be escorted through a side entrance by security. The pediatrician testified first. She confirmed our son was healthy, well cared for, meeting all milestones. She also revealed that Jane had attempted to access his medical records multiple times, claiming to be his mother. The office had to implement special security protocols just for his file. The CPS workers testified next. They detailed how each investigation found no evidence of abuse or neglect, how the reports always came from the same IP addresses, how the allegations grew more outlandish with each filing. One worker admitted she'd never seen such a coordinated campaign of false reporting. Jane's lawyer made one last attempt, arguing that regardless of methods, Jane deserved some relationship with the child she'd been promised. He proposed a graduated visitation schedule, starting with supervised visits. Jane nodded eagerly, clutching her doll. The judge's expression turned stern. She asked Jane directly what she would call the child during these visits. Jane answered without hesitation. She'd call him by the name she'd chosen, not the name we'd given him. She'd tell him she was his real mother. She saw nothing wrong with this plan. Our lawyer didn't need to respond. Jane had made our case for us. The judge announced she'd render her decision after lunch. Those 3 hours felt like 3 years. When court reconvened, the gallery was even fuller. Mom had mobilized everyone she could, but the judge's decision was swift and decisive. Not only was the restraining order upheld, but it was expanded. Jane and Mom were barred from any contact, direct or indirect. Any third-party harassment would be considered a violation. More importantly, the judge dismissed Jane's custody petition with prejudice. this. She could never file again. The judge stated clearly that Jane's delusions and Mom's enabling posed a serious threat to our son's well-being. She recommended Jane seek psychiatric help. Jane's scream echoed through the courthouse. She threw her doll at the judge, had to be physically restrained by bailiffs. Mom tried to maintain composure, but her hands shook as she gathered her things. The church supporters filed out silently, their righteous cause suddenly tainted by Jane's breakdown. But the judge wasn't finished. She'd reviewed our financial records and understood the deliberate destruction of our lives. She ordered Jane and Mom to pay our legal fees and damages. It wouldn't cover everything, but it was something. More importantly, it was vindication. Our lawyer warned us to be careful leaving. Emotions were high. But when we walked out, the crowd had dispersed. Only a few stragglers remained, looking confused and embarrassed. Without Mom's orchestration, the movement collapsed. Well, folks, that's story time all wrapped up with a bow. Appreciate you letting me play the role of your smart aleck friend through it all. Catch you on the flip side. Like the video, it helps more than you think.